Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Musician's Mentor Podcast. I'm your host, Travis Mark, and today I have the distinct pleasure of talking with the one and only Luke Wade. Many of you may have heard of Luke from his time as a top 10 contestant on season 7 of The Voice. He also makes and releases music as YoungTones Music, and he's just a phenomenal singer and phenomenal songwriter. We get into all the nitty-gritty as usual, so I'm going to get straight to that. But please, as usual, do me a favor. If you're getting anything from these episodes, head to any of your favorite streaming platforms and leave us a rating or review. It helps us get discovered easier and helps us achieve our goal of hopefully helping up-and-coming musicians. So that'd be a solid if you could do it for us. Thank you. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Luke Wade. Hey Luke, it's Travis. How you doing, man?
Doing great.
Good. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to do this. Truly appreciate it. I know you're a busy man. So we're going to jump straight into it. Basically, what I do with everybody, as weird and random as it may seem, is I ask if you would give us a bit of an introduction as to who Luke Wade is. Tell us some of the stuff you've done. Tell us what you're currently doing. Tell us just anything that you feel might help our listeners understand a little bit more from where you're coming from during the course of this interview.
Well, it's been a long and varied journey within, the music business and also kind of music creation and creativity. So just started out really. So I'm the child of an artist. My father's name is Bob Stuth Wade, and he's a painter, and so he's kind of my inspiration. He's kind of my blueprint for realizing that you could make your passion your life, creativity your life, and make things and support a family with them. So a lot of folks don't have that kind of role model and mentor in their life, and it gave me the courage to kind of fail my way forward and start being mediocre in front of people and getting better. So I guess I've been a professional musician for 20 years. Just toured regionally in Texas. I was starting to build that up. Was on The Voice. Was a finalist on The Voice, which was a huge, just kind of a whirlwind. And then used that to tour nationally with my band and for a number of years. Got married, and so came off the road. And since that has happened, I signed a pub deal. I've had some cuts and some syncs and different things like that with a company called Angry Mob. I was with them for 4 years. And then also, and in my other life, I work in entertainment. So I've been, I'm a talent producer for The Voice. So whenever I want to get off the road, I've been helping them finding talent. And I've been with The Voice for 11 seasons now. And let's see. And then through trying to navigate this landscape, I've become kind of an expert in the digital marketing space. And so I do that freelance. I've worked for a number of different agencies in the digital marketing space. And then now I'm really pushing hard on a new project called YoungTones. I spent a lot of time using music as therapy, and now and as I've gotten older, I've kind of thought of it more as a place for escape. So finding just making throwback soul music that's just fun and it's just pure joy for me. It's not as the necessity of catharsis isn't there, where it's just about everyone kind of showing up and being in the moment and escaping to just a fun place together. And so that's currently my focus is on the launching the second record for YoungTones.
Nice. And I really like that, because I find that when you're doing music as a career, there's points where the joy sort of exits. Now, that's not to say it's not fun, but like to come back to something that just makes you feel so happy and in the moment and the fun's there and stuff, that's great. We'll talk about the Young Tones in a bit. I've got a couple things that I want to ask you about that. But let's just backtrack here a little bit. So, you're originally from Dublin, Texas, I believe, right?
That's correct. Yes, I'm from Dublin.
And from what I was sort of hearing and reading, you kind of developed a bit of a name for yourself in Fort Worth, and obviously you landed up on The Voice and stuff, which we'll talk about as well. From what I understand, you're now in LA, and you might have already answered the question, with your personal life, getting married, stuff like that. But talk us through how you ended up in LA. Was that purely from being on The Voice and you just felt you needed to be in more of that sort of hub? Or was that sort of a plan all along to end up there?
Well, once after I spent a good amount of time here when I was on The Voice. So I essentially lived here for 3 months. It's a long process. And, kind of get a feel for the city. But ultimately, I had this sense that Fort Worth had a bit of a glass ceiling. It felt like moving out of mom and dad's house, where Fort Worth had taken care of me. It had, like, if I had a show, people would show up and had allowed me to, have a living in music and feel like a celebrity in my town, essentially. But it felt like it was time to move out of mom and dad's house and kind of make it on my own. And if you're doing that, there's a few options if you want to stay in the U.S. You've got, at one point it was New York, Nashville, and L.A. And then New York kind of got too expensive and chased all the musicians out, and then it became L.A. and Nashville. So that was kind of my choice, was Nashville and L.A. And then when you're betting on yourself, I think the belief has to be that whoever the best people are, wherever you go, those will become your peers. That's kind of the mindset. And I was thinking about who, would I, the best of the best in LA versus the best of the best in Nashville. Who would I want my peers to be? And I thought, well, I think it's LA. And it turned out to be the right choice. Within 4 months of moving to LA, I got my first pub deal, and which was kind of the foundation of building that secondary music career.
That's awesome, man. Well done. Let's talk a little bit about The Voice. And I mean, I'm sure you've spoken about this numerous times over the last decade or so. But tell us about your experience with the show as a contestant. So I'm not talking about you as a talent buyer now. Tell us about some of the ups and downs. Discuss a few things that maybe you feel singers who want to go on the show and compete might want to know or consider before doing so. And, just your overall experience, good and bad, if you don't mind, share it with us.
Yeah, it was really, from, now having seen what the experience is like for lots of people working on the show, I can say that my experience it was a bit of a Cinderella story, where I was the one that they teased the season with. Like, all the coaches were on Ellen, and they showed my audition, and all the chairs turned, and all the executive producers were like, "This is the guy. He's going to win the show. He's going to, he's going to be someone that's going to, like, be successful after the show." There's a lot of buy-in within the staff and the production and the show, and I didn't know it or feel it until they started promoting it, and I was on commercials and all those kinds of things. And so that's not out of the 150 people that are lined up to do blind auditions each season, that's the experience of maybe like one person, maybe, and sometimes a season doesn't even have someone that gets that experience. So mine was really unique and really gave me a lot of confidence and pumped me up. And I had been I'd been on the road playing. I was probably doing, I don't know, 20 hours of live performing per week. like literally not including driving, not like just actually sitting there playing songs for other humans 20 hours a week. Because I was doing, Thursday. It's interesting being in Texas, and if you want to have a band, what ultimately happens is that the best players, they have church gigs, and that's how they make their money. So you got to get them home by like 8 a.m. on Sunday morning. And so it was every Thursday, Friday, Saturday, we would do a run, drive to the night, Saturday night, get all the musicians home to be sleepy as hell at church. And then the other day, Sunday, and so I had a residency on Sunday, and then on Tuesday and Wednesday as well. So it was just, so much music. But anyway, top of my game, was able to kind of spike the ball in the end zone, and yeah, so it was really just a fun ride. Just filled myself and the people around me and the people that knew me before full of confidence that I was going to do something. So it was, honestly, it couldn't have been better. There was the moment that the band made a pretty big mistake, while I was on stage. And NBC made a commercial out of it because I was the front runner. They called it the moment that shocked America. And it was a whole thing, man. And that was kind of what derailed things and ended up, exiting the show, a couple, like the episode before the end. So yeah, that was kind of, obviously that changed things a bit, in terms of the experience, but it endeared me to the folks on the show because they asked me what happened. I had an opportunity to say, the band messed up, and I held myself accountable for what happened as well. And so the band, whenever I see them, they still remember me and give me hugs and tell me, I guess just give me props for standing up to the moment and holding myself accountable.
Yeah. So what happened? I mean, did they just play a song in the wrong key, or was somebody out of time? What was happening?
I think that they were really getting burned out, at this point. It was season 7, two seasons a year, and they didn't have, like, the guitar player had opted to not have me in his ears, or maybe it was like an accident, but I wasn't in the guitar player's ears. And so the recording that I had to practice to, the count in was 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. No, so the count in on the recording I was 1, 2, 3, 4, song start. And I start the song by myself, just a guitar and vocal. And then live, the drummer went 1, 2, 1, and so there's an extra measure of counting. Yeah. But I'm in the adrenaline of the moment. I hear 1, and then I just count 2, 3, 4, just like the recording I practiced to 1,000 times, and then came in. And so what ended up happening was the guitar player came in, because I came in a measure early. Yeah. The guitar player was playing chords a measure off from what I was playing and singing.
What a bummer, man.
And then, so we ended up doing this thing where I'm like, I assume that we're probably playing with tracks. So I need to switch what I'm doing to the guitar player. And so after the first times and changes, I pull a measure out and go back and then line up with the guitar. But then the band moves to where I was. And then we do that a couple of times where I'm switching to them, they're switching to me. And then eventually the drummer does the fill that indicates the chorus is coming, and then we all get on the same page in that moment. But it was just, this was the peak of the show. We're talking about, 14 million people, viewers per episode, something like that. Mm-hmm. So it was, it was pretty intense, man. It was pretty crazy, and it was I guess my kind of seasoning, the fact that I had I was a kind of an experienced performer and had the ability to kind of course correct, bit me in the ass a little bit because they were kind of moving to me and for whatever. And so I was super bummed out. I honestly, I'm not a psychologist to diagnose myself, but I think I got some PTSD from it because after that, I would just have just so much anxiety before I went on, and it would make my mind it would take me out of that zone. And so, I'm not sure if you experience this, but if you think about the words of the song or the chords of the song, you're dead. Like if you're in your head and you're not just feeling the music
Oh,
and
yeah.
experiencing the music, if you're doing it, if you're trying to do it like it's a math problem, I mean, it just doesn't.
You can't
It
feel
just
it
doesn't
then.
work that way. Yeah, so that's kind of what happened to me. Where that's where I went after that. I just was shell shocked and never really got back to where I was before.
What a bummer, man. I was going to ask you what you thought the hardest part of being on the show was, but I think you've kind of answered that. That sounds horrible. I'm sorry that happened. Did you find that in that situation, and I'm asking more out of personal interest rather than an interview question here, but do you find that in that situation, and I'm genuinely asking not from an ignorance point of view, do the band respect some of the contestants in a musician point of view? Because I mean, those are all like the top session players. So do they kind of like just expect that everybody's just a singer, and stereotyping would be, well, they're just a singer, they're not going to know the difference between a measure or a couple bars, or we'll fix it for them? Or do you think that like they could, I mean, talking out of turn here, because I have interviewed Nate in the past, the drummer, but
Oh wow, very cool.
yeah, not for this podcast, for a different publication. But so I'm not trying to sort of sound like
Nate
I'm
is. I
being.
mean, by the way, Nate Morton is
Oh,
like
he's the
just a
man.
heart. Yeah, he's so good, but he's also just so sweet and humble. But um, the answer to your question is that most of the folks that are on the show are as green as you could possibly imagine. They've never, a lot of those people, the first time they are singing in front of humans is on that stage.
Wow.
So you think about it at this point, was it 48 people make teams per season? We're on season like 24 or something. So we're talking about 1,000 people that have made teams, and you're talking about, 2,000 that have auditioned.
Yeah.
So it's on that blind audition stage. So it's hard to find that many people that have that kind of the pedigree to know what's going on. So in their defense, they don't know. They assume you don't know anything. But by the end of the show, actually the music director, he's still the music director. His name, he used to be the keyboard player for Whitesnake. Oh gosh, what is his name? It's oh man, I can't. I'll think of it in a second. I'm
That's
actually
okay.
gonna look it up. But he had me come to his house and work on the arrangements for the songs after that. Like literally came to went to his house, made me cappuccino, hung out with his family, um, and so once you get a level of respect, then it changes everything, and they
Yeah.
listen to you. But there's the assumption that you don't know anything. Um, Paul Merkovich,
Okay.
that's his name. Paul Merkovich. Yeah. So they think that because they're usually right, but you can earn the respect is the answer to your question, and they're all lovely humans. And it's interesting the way that whole circumstance works. I'm not sure if you're interested in this, but within the music department, they have guys that their job is to create charts from the arrangements that the band does. So they'll have a rehearsal, and then they'll learn that they'll like create an arrangement for the contestant, and then they'll forget it. They just clean slate, and then after they arrange it, then they read the charts that the music department makes for them.
Hmm.
So it's pretty interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting process, you know. No, I was just wondering, because I mean, like, I know, gigging a lot as a musician myself and stuff like that. I know that sometimes the stigma is, it's just a singer. And you kind of go like, not everybody's just a singer. And there's nothing wrong being just a singer anyway. But like, it always had me wondering when I watch those kinds of shows, like, I wonder if they just assume because you're there singing, if that's your only musical knowledge. It's an interesting concept. Nonetheless, let's move on.
Yeah.
Let's talk about
Sure.
the YoungTones. I mean, I saw that you're basically the face of it live and stuff like that, but I know that there's another guy involved. So tell me a little bit about who's involved now, what you currently doing within the group, and how's it all going. I know you mentioned that you're working on a new record at the top of the interview, but talk to us about the YoungTones.
So YoungTones I dove into that in terms of just starting to release material, like April 2021 is when that launched. But the Matt Young, my partner on the project, and we wrote our first song in 2017. We met at South by Southwest. I was writing hooks for a music library called Indaba that was eventually purchased by Splice. And so basically my job was to come in, and then we would just go through different tracks that had already been created, and then I would just write as many hooks as I could in an hour. But we ended up writing this like throwback soul tune that probably exists somewhere that you could take any part of it and turn it into a hip hop song, or like write your own verses to it, whatever the circumstance may be. So that lives somewhere. But the vibe was so good that we're like, we got to keep this going. And we happen to both be on the same publisher as well.
Cool.
So comes to LA, we've got like 2 hours. We end up knocking a song out in like 45 minutes. And then we realize that we just have this crazy chemistry. Sometimes when we get together, we'll write and then produce demos we've done 4 songs in a day, like not just written, but also, partially, like mostly produced. So it was a really cool partnership. And then we're going to release it in 2020. Pandemic hit, and then eventually was able to get it out in 2021. And then, so did the rollout over the course of about a year and a half, like a little over a year before the record. Right at a year that the album rollout took place. And then we went to the studio. We did, one of my dreams was to do a record to tape. Do things the old school way. And so we're able to do that, and we're able to get some of my musical heroes. Why not Jansfeld, who's a member of the Wallflowers and has been playing with Matchbox 20. Has been on some of my favorite records. Rob Humphreys, who he's Scary Pockets. Casey Musgraves has also been on some of my favorite records. Will Grambling, and then Luke O'Malley, who's a guitar player for the Roots, was on the session. So it's just so much fun to make a record with those dudes. And then Matt, I essentially just sang on it. I ended up overdubbing some guitars, and Matt, the producer, overdubbed, some background vocals and some things here and there, but mostly it was entirely done live by that band. But the record's completely done. We're going to start releasing singles in January. We've got some B-sides and some songs we did in the box that we're going to release before that. We're ramping up to it. Christmas song. But yeah, it's just, so that rollout is going to take, I think it's like a 9-month rollout for that, but really excited about it. And we're going to do a lot more live shows this time. And hopefully, honestly, my dream would be to have enough fans for that project that we can just pick a collection of cities that we want to go to and hit them and sell enough tickets to make a little bit of money.
Yeah,
That's ultimately the dream.
that's awesome. I mean, it's achievable, nowadays. It's hard, as you would know by now. But I think it is achievable. These all these articles are always coming out saying that if you can just get 1,000 legitimate fans, that you can like have a career as an original artist. Which it doesn't sound realistic, but you definitely see. I don't necessarily enjoy the term influencer, but you definitely see some inverted commas influencers who don't have hundreds of thousands or even millions of fans, and they turn in over enough to create salaries and live. So that's awesome, man. I wish you nothing but the best. I hope it goes well. I mean, having those kinds of names on the record in the first place is killer. Absolutely amazing. What's your process? Are you gonna release like purely singles to try and hit those algorithms on things like Spotify, or are you gonna have a certain amount of singles before you potentially put the whole album out?
So I really, I started dipping my toe in the more traditional style of release, and it's still very, surprisingly, in terms of the industry at large and the expectations there for having a music video and having a publicist and all these different things, it's still very much there. Because whenever you're just trying to launch a project like it with YoungTones, it's the obvious thing to do is play the algorithm game where you're just posting on social and you're releasing singles once a month. So I toyed with the idea of, we've got more budget for this record. So like getting a big deal publicist and doing a radio promoter and a number of different things. Um, but ultimately decided not to, just because they all, it's, they all want to know. It's like the publicist wants to know who your management is. And I, I'm self-managed. And the radio promoter wants to know, they basically, everyone wants a name attached,
Yeah.
whether it's a label or a management company, just for the sake of accountability. It's like, it's like applying for a bank loan, where it's like
Exactly.
they want to look and see, what kind of, a capital, or like what incentives you have to hold up your end of the deal. So I found that to be a really fascinating unpacking of how little things have changed, even though everything is completely different. So it just, again, I think we're gonna do like a ton of singles. So including the singles releasing before the record comes out, I guess it'll be 12 singles and then the record.
That's cool.
Um, yeah, just to warm up the algorithm, try to make the computers happy, and ultimately kind of get the numbers to a place. And I'm open if a record label is to come in after, if things start doing really well, moving to a record label and doing a more traditional style release for the remaining singles and the record. I would be open to that.
Yeah.
But we'll have to see how that goes.
So let's segue slightly off here, just because you made an interesting phrase like make the computers happy. And I know that everybody's talking about it, but what are your thoughts on the whole AR movement, and how do you personally think it's going to affect music, or in particular songwriters, if at all?
Mm. Um, I it's it will definitely change the landscape to some degree. I don't think, um, you're still going to have stars. You're going to have these big artists that break through and have these massive fan bases because of just the connection that they make with people. I think that ultimately what music has become, it's based on, whether you're able to make an impact on social media with your image, and I don't think that that's going to change. The combination of your vision and your music, I think that's going to change. In terms of like, I think it's going to affect sync, because I think that, for bed music and different things, especially with the challenges of the entertainment industry, where budgets are shrinking for shows, and I think that they'll use generative AI music for a lot of stuff there. So I think that will be affected. So, which is a fairly small swath of that, of the industry, and that part of the industry in particular. So I think that that's where the impact will be within music. The other impact is, I think that it's going to put a lot of folks out of work that will then have no choice but to chase their own dreams.
Yeah.
And it will, there'll be even more people trying to play the music game in a market that's already, so inundated with folks. So
Yeah. I thought it was very interesting because, I think I agree with pretty much every point you've made. And I'm watching a lot of the strike with the actors and the writers and stuff like that. And I saw a very interesting post yesterday by a really prominent guitarist, and he said, like, he was referring it back to music, and just saying that, like, it's interesting that the actors and everybody could stand together, and they're trying to change this before it gets too much of an impact on their careers. Whereas, like, musicians, when streaming and stuff hit, were basically just told to adapt how they worked. And streaming, it's a bit of a bittersweet pill, because as an artist, and again, you would know, you need it. You've got to have your music on those platforms, because your chances of reaching somebody in the most remote, random place that you could imagine suddenly are now possible. But with that, the value of music just seems to be so much less than I remember it being as a kid. And obviously you can't, hop on the past. Things change. You have to move with those changes. But it is interesting, because it's like, I was having a conversation with some teenagers the other day, and out of interest, because they're music lovers, and so out of interest, I was like, "Hey, man, like, what's your, like, number one go-to album?" And I'm not lying to you. Out of about 4 people that I was talking with, none of them had ever listened to an album from start to finish. So that shocked me. And then I was like, okay, well, what was the last album you bought? And keep in mind, most of these people were aged between sort of 16 and 20. Not one of them had ever bought an album. And that blew my mind. But also, that being said, I understand. If you've grown up in that environment and you've never had to purchase an album, why would you? It's all free. You can get it pretty much for free anywhere you want. And if you don't want to pay for a subscription, well, you can get it free with ads. So it's very interesting. Nonetheless, so again, talking to you and having done my research, you seem rather DIY. I know you've had the exposure from the voice, and obviously you've had the syncs and the cuts and stuff that you mentioned earlier. But talk us through some of the skills that you feel musicians or songwriters or producers, anybody in this sort of landscape, should try and sort of get or acquire in order to try and carve out their own path in today's version of the music industry.
So I'm going to separate this into 2 parts. I'm going to tell you some of the skills that I've acquired and some things that I found helpful.
Okay.
And then I'm going to tell you why, at the end of the day, that I don't know how much it matters. And I'll tell you why. Okay. So, just basically knowing how to communicate with people that are more talented than you, and being able to communicate your vision with those people, I would say that's the most important skill. So figuring out how to put the band together, how to motivate that band to continue to play with you, and how to make that experience enjoyable, how to package your, like putting together a vision board for the aesthetic for a project or an album to communicate with a designer. Being able to just talk to other people, right? But at the same time, that all those people, you need to take care of them. That costs money, and you may not have money. So learning how to do design, you know, web development, and even digital marketing to the best of your ability, how to video editing. It's really, you got to wear so many hats to be fully DIY. Just know how to essentially be your own media company and your own production company. So those are things that obviously, as much of that as you can do in house, the better off you are in terms of your ability to have control over your own destiny. But being 40 years old, I turned 40 this year, and having seen the way that things shake out over time, the people that I know that are the most successful, um, Leon Bridges, my friend Matt McAndrew, my friend Jordy Searcy, who else would I put in this category? Anyway, like I've had the opportunity to meet a lot of really amazing people that have done big things. So, and the thing that they all have in common is that they're going to create, and they don't have expectations for the creation. So all the things I talked about, digital marketing, design, whatever, they're all based around getting to a level that aligns with your expectation for what you create. How many people are going to see it? How much money is it going to make? What is it going to do for your life? That, the folks I mentioned, they would just, if people didn't like the stuff that they made, they would literally just live in there. They would just be homeless or live in their car. Like they just were going to be exactly who they are and do exactly what they do, regardless of what happened. And that's just who they are. And to me, that is honestly, and I'm not sure if that's something you can become. I think you're that person or you're not that person. Like you are that person or you aren't that person. But that's really the most important thing is like, you got to let go of the idea, like, of what it's supposed to do for you, and just do it, and don't ever stop doing it, and just follow where it leads you, and you'll, yeah, I mean, that's how you become very successful in music as an artist. And it's easy once you kind of, you start developing these skills to find yourself in, at least from my experiences, that I end up in these places that are adjacent to where I want to be. What I really want to be is I want to be an artist. I want to be on tour. I want to be, writing cuts that people care about. I want that, like, want to make something that inspires people and that people care about. And what I end up doing is people will be like, will you do your digital marketing for me? Will you do casting for The Voice? And I say, I have these expectations for my life that I want to have a certain quality of life. And so I take those gigs and don't create as much as I could, and don't do as much touring as I could. Don't write as many songs as I could. Don't produce as much as I could. And, I think that it's the challenge is to find that line between your motivation and your expectation.
I like that. And also very relatable, you know. Um, I just find that it's interesting, the wearing many hats situation. I have this discussion fairly often. And it is, you almost need to learn these skills so that you can put out your vision how you want to have it put out, or you need to pay for it. And, the way I've seen it in my years is if you're giving out money to everybody, which, listen, I'm not saying don't pay people for their skills. Pay people for their skills if you can afford it. But if you're giving out money to everybody, at the end of the day, there's no money left. And it's like, I'm not trying to make it all about money. This is art. But the line between, money and art is so tricky, because if you have it in your blood that you're trying to be an artist, but you have to live, that's really a tough line to navigate. And so these people that you mentioned who sort of stay so true to themselves, it's super admirable, because it's like, I think, and this is just my 2 cents on the matter, I think that, if you're doing something that you really believe in, the right people will find that. Now, does that mean you'll be a superstar? I don't know. But the people who can relate will relate eventually. Might not be at the time that you hope them to, but I mean, how many people have unfortunately passed away, and then suddenly the world realizes that they had some sense of genius? And it's like, I'm not saying that that's what it needs to be, but maybe if you do accept it, like you're saying, you kind of live a more peaceful life without thinking, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, I've got to do this. And it just becomes about the arts, and maybe that's enough to fulfill you, you know? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, it's easy for me to point to these examples and say that that's what everyone should do. But at the end of the day, you either have to have time or, to create, um, and to be places, and you either have to have time or you have to have money. One of those two things. Um, if you don't have time, any time or any money, then you're really kind of stuck.
Yeah.
So if you're in the grind where you almost have to be like a vagrant, or be on disability, or be on unemployment, or to or have the support of people around you, um, to really to have the time to, if you're someone that's yeah, you're working at Burger King and you're making 50, I don't know, $12 an hour, $15 an hour, depending, $20 an hour, and you're just trying to pay for your spot and have no extra dollars and no time. Like, that's a tough place to grow from. So anyone who's in that situation, like, I really, um, you know, I know, I feel you. Like, and I think we've all been there where before I went full-time music, I was a bartender, and it was, it was really, it's tough.
Yeah. You sound like quite a creative guy, so it sounds to me, when you have that creative DNA and you have this need to want to create all the time, and then you suddenly have to tie those hours down to somebody else's time, feels very restricting, almost imprisoning,
When it's very challenging to, at least for me, there's always resistance in moving from the analytical side of my brain to the creative side. So if I think that people think of themselves as being one or the other, I just think that moving between those two skill sets, to me, it's legitimately painful. So I I'm not someone that can, all right, I'm going to go and do all this stuff for the voice and do all this digital marketing for 5 hours, and then I'm going to produce for 5 hours. It's just, my brain doesn't work that way. It's momentum based, where I get a momentum towards a certain kind of process, and putting the brakes on, and switching cars, and getting going again. It's it's really tough.
Yeah. Hey, Luke, talk to us a couple minutes about your songwriting process. If you have a particular process, what does it take to get you inspired or creative? You just mentioned momentum. Do you have to be in the mindset to write, or are you one of these people who can just write whenever? Um, and likewise, have you got any tips, or even if you want to call them tricks, that up and coming songwriters might be able to adapt to improve their own craft?
Yeah, I mean, I think step one is kind of finding your voice. Um, so I think just starting out by being really unfiltered. At least that's how it was for me, where it was just unbridled self-expression, and I was just kind of, the structure and the production. It's kind of like putting a frame on an abstract painting, and which is cool. But at the same time, it doesn't necessarily, sometimes because it's all coming out of you, it can feel cohesive, but sometimes it can feel chaotic. So, taking over time, finding out which things make sense together and which things don't. That's whenever you really start to hone on your artistry. So at this point, if I want to make sure I get a song, uh, writing the melody first. So having a loop or some kind of track or just chords on a guitar, and then writing a mumble melody that feels interesting, that pulls me in, and then allowing that to inform the lyric. That seems to be the most foolproof way to do it. I still just have these moments where something will hit me, and it's like, oh, this is a great idea, and I roll with it from there. But yeah, so I mean, it's always write down, have a list of hooks and ideas and things to where it's like, I bet I have something for this melody, and you can go in and be like, oh, that's this idea that I had 3 weeks ago. I mean, those are all important parts of it, but at the end of the day, it's it's creativity is a reflection of what's going on in your head and your heart, and I'm not sure what that looks like for everyone else, but for me, that's pretty messy business. My head, there's always a lot of things bouncing around in my head, and there's always a lot of things, in and on my heart. So sorting through those things and making sense of them is often a pretty chaotic process.
Yeah, but that's probably where your art comes from, you know?
Yeah.
Luke, second last question. Where can people find you if they want to check out more of your music or just find out more about you or even work with you?
So, social. YoungTones Music is the social for all of the YoungTones stuff. YoungTonesmusic.com. Luke Wave Music is for all my solo stuff. And I don't really advertise the digital marketing services. I mean, if you really want to take a deep dive into my process, my partner Matt and I have a class on project building, production, and releasing for through Young. It's on studio.com. So like Ryan Tedder has a course there. Charlie Puth, and they asked us to do a class on throwback production. So you can check that. If you get that class, I think it's like 12 hours long.
Oh, wow.
of just everything from songwriting to production to some basic digital marketing techniques and branding and all kinds of stuff.
That's awesome. All right, we're going to finish with a heavy hitter. I don't know if you've listened to the podcast before, but this always seems to make people gasp. So if it makes you gasp and you need a couple seconds, by all means, take your time. But what do you feel has been the best piece of advice you've ever received in relation to your music career?
The best piece of advice I've ever received. So I'll name drop here. So Pharrell said to me, it's you can't read the label from inside the bottle. Um, and what that, and I thought that was really insightful. And basically what that, as advice, what that means to me is that sometimes you have to admit to yourself that you're not the best judge of what you're doing. So you've got to surround yourself with people that you trust to be honest with you. I see it, working for The Voice and hearing thousands of singers. Most people are lying to you that tell you that you're good. Find the people that are that care about you and your art and the future of your creative life. They care about it enough to really give you their unfiltered opinion. Find those people, hold them close to you. Don't shut them. Don't think that people are being mean. Cherish those people that are being honest with you, because we just don't have the ability to see what the label should be on our bottle.
That's great. And actually really fresh, no one's said anything like that before. So that's really cool. All right, man. Luke Wade, dude, thank you so very much for your time and your insight, and just, for being willing to share some of your experience with us. I'm sure the listeners are going to get tons out of this. I know I did. I will link all of your relative information in the show notes. But dude, I wish you nothing but the best, and I can't thank you enough.
Of course, my pleasure.
All right, bye. Awesome. I'd like to thank Luke for his time. As usual, I would like to thank each and every one of you for your time. Thank you for listening. Truly, I appreciate it. I know I don't always get to say it. I don't even know how many people listen to the outros of these things, but I appreciate you, and I'm just grateful that we're still able to do this. I know I said it at the start. Please leave us a rating or review. Please share us with your friends who you feel might get something from this. My name is Travis Mark. You can find out more about me at travismark.com. You can find out more about The Musician's Mentor at themusicians-mentor.com. You keep following your dreams, man. Push, work hard. Anything is achievable. I'll see you next time. Peace.